Welcome to the webinar, Doing Lent with Disabilities, offered by the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America's Center for Family Care, Fully Human Ministry. My name is Presbytera Melanie DiStefano, and I am the resource developer, at the Center for Family Care, and I also coordinate the Fully Human Ministry for families with disabilities there. Our office first would like to thank Leadership 100 for the grant funding, which makes webinars such as these possible. I'd like to also share one housekeeping issue. We're using a different platform, as you know, other than in Zoom, which most people are used to by now. It works very similarly, but we've noticed one issue that in the chat, there's not a way to make yourself anonymous. So there are a couple of things you can do. You can just enter chat with initials or a first name, an alias, if you will, or if you wish, if you have a sensitive question that you're not comfortable sharing your name with. Another is if there's something of a more personal nature, you can also email me after this webinar at presmelanie@goarch.org, and I will try to address your issues, put you in touch with the panelists here today at another time to try to address whatever your questions are. Also, just so you know, the chat part is not recorded, so this video will not show any chat. And
Hi.
so when
I'm here, I've got a late checkout.
So there was one of our panelists. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists, and then Father Anthony can lead us in a prayer before we start our conversation. So we are honored and excited to have three panelists join us today in our webinar, Doing Lent with Disabilities. The Very Reverend Father Anthony Yaji is the pastor of St. George Orthodox Church in Fishers, Indiana. He has overseen the Teen Soil Special Olympics camp for 20 years, which he founded along with his cousin when they were teens. He also is the father of an adult son with a disability, so he's familiar with what we all experience. Natalie Kapellik-Nixon is the director of youth ministries for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the United States of America. Her office developed a college student mission trip to work with special needs orphans in the Ukraine, as well as the St. Nicholas Special Needs Parish Ministry Initiative. She also has a son with disabilities. Charlotte Riggle has raised a house full of children with disabilities before being diagnosed with autism herself as an adult. She is the author of the picture book, Catherine's Pascha, and is currently working on a book of stories about saints who lived with disability and chronic illness. Welcome to our panelists and to everyone here with us. We're so happy we can have this conversation. So before we start, Father Anthony will lead us in a prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We thank you, O Christ our God, for this blessing of this day, that we might come together, seeking your will in all things, especially as how we might care for one another, especially those who have been entrusted with the care of our children who need our help and assistance and guidance. We ask you to bless us in all our endeavors, that this might be fruitful unto your good pleasure. For you only art holy, always, now, and ever, and into ages of ages. Amen.
Amen. So I think before we start getting into the details, the actual challenges that our families might face, it would be good to go back and just talk about what the purpose of Lent is in the first place. What is the purpose of our increased prayer life, our increased fasting and almsgiving during this time? Maybe, Father, you can start this.
Sure, I'll be happy to. So as we all know, in the midst of this fasting period, this Lenten season, it's a time really for us to draw closer to Christ. The church in her wisdom gives us so many opportunities to do that. One way is, of course, the increased liturgical life that happens in our parishes, and that varies from parish to parish. But some churches, we can be in the liturgical life 5 to 6 days or so a week, if not all 7 days of the week, if we choose to participate in that. But it's also an opportunity for further education. It could be an opportunity for more silence and more ascetical efforts in our life, and not just merely worrying about dietary restrictions. And I think we're going to kind of touch upon that, how that really is going to be impacted with us coming up as well. but it really is a time to immerse ourselves in our relationship with Christ, and kind of put aside a lot of the daily things that we might normally tend to that aren't essential, to give more time to God in this time. And that's at least what I, as a priest, tell my parishioners on a regular basis and encourage them. But at the same time, we have to also consider, that not all of us can do the same full discipline of the Lenten season.
Any panelists like to add to that? You have to unmute yourself, Charlie.
Charlie, you're still muted.
Am I still muted? Did that
It's
clear
okay.
it? All right, thank you. So if I could gather my thoughts back. No, one of the things that families with disabilities, most of us deal with, is a schedule we've already got more on our plate than we can deal with. Even the family members that aren't disabled, when you've got work and school and therapy appointments and best practices activities, the occupational therapist has recommended that you have your child involved in this kind of activity because it's going to help their development, and you've got so much to do. And a lot of us by evening, we're exhausted. And if you try to bundle everybody up and head them off to church, instead of centering your heart on Christ and on repentance and all of those other things, you're trying not to cry. At least I've been there a time or two over the years. And so when we focus on what you were describing as the purpose of Lent, as much as we might love the services and want to be there, sometimes there's just not a way. So one of the things that we focused on when my kids are all adults now, but when they were young, one of the things we started doing was, just as we might eat fewer things or eat less during Lent, we started looking at activities we could cut out. And we found that fasting from all of the stuff that we normally did, that was a way to simplify and allow space to breathe and to reflect and to pray and just to be together. And we found that was something that we found powerful.
One of the things I was going to mention too is that working with your priest to see how things can be altered. For example, in my parish, we started doing pre-sanctified liturgies in addition to Wednesday night, Friday mornings, recognizing that there's a certain segment of our population of the parish that just can't get out at night. Or like you said, Charlie, at the end of the day, with so many things happening, we're giving them an alternative way to experience the liturgical life of the church, perhaps in another time that fits their schedule, that still doesn't break from the tradition of the church. And we're finding that the case. So I'm not only getting elderly, but I'm also getting families with young children, especially those homeschooling families and things too, coming to church then.
And the purpose of all of these things is to help us draw nearer to Christ, as you said, Father. And so I think of these ascetic practices as sort of rules of thumb, but everyone's thumbprint is different. We all have different fingerprints and sizes of hands. So we have to realize that we are unique and every person is unique. And like you said, Charlie, how can we simplify? How can we fast from whatever we consume, not just foods? We may not even ever be able to fast from foods. My child is medically compromised, and if I changed his diet, it would throw off his system so much. And he has a very limited diet as it is. So to get him the proper nutrition, it's just not going to happen. So we all have different needs, and they're just for the purpose of opening our hearts and souls, calming our bodies so that we can receive Christ more fully, the Holy Spirit more fully.
And in that light too, it's very clear that the church has always had that practice. One size does not fit all. The church has its guidelines, but understands that each of us are at a different place spiritually, and things in our lives. And so that has to be considered. And we have to do the same thing with our families. I did it with my children. I had 3 children, and we tackled our approach to life in the church uniquely with all 3, with a general overall kind of guideline. And we have to be adaptable in that way.
Father, I'd like to go back to what you said about talking to your spiritual father about maybe adjusting when services are, if a parish can. But I just think in general, as we're talking about not one size fits all for anything within the faith, that's supposed to also go back to the fact that we should all be talking to our spiritual fathers about our lives. And I feel sometimes those of us who have families with unique needs, we tend to shy away from doing that for many reasons. We're used to always having to re-explain ourselves. Maybe we feel we're not going to be understood. Maybe we feel that we won't get the answers that we desire. But, if we're going at this from an Orthodox perspective, I think having a broader conversation with your spiritual father about the unique challenges and blessings of your family, and then having him be a part of what you're mapping out for your family, I think will give you a greater sense of peace. Because sometimes when we make these decisions on our own, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to do it, but, no one else needs to know. But I think when you have your spiritual father's blessing, it's going to bring you so much peace to what you're doing with your family when he says, I get it. And I think you're making the right choice for your family. And I'm with you and I'm behind you and I'm praying for you. So I would encourage in anything we talk about today, maybe just walk away with that thought of having some deeper and broader discussions with your spiritual father and including him in this journey with your family.
That's great advice.
I was going to say, sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
I was going to say, and even if your spiritual father doesn't say, I get it, because I can think of one particularly difficult year in our family, and we told our priest what we thought it was going to take for us to survive that year. And he acknowledged that he didn't get it. His life experience didn't include anything that would allow him to get it. But he was behind us and he supported us. So I want to share that just because for people who are scared to go talk to their spiritual father because their spiritual father might not get it, it might be okay that they don't get it. And in a way, there was a lot of, for me, there was a lot of almost relief in knowing that even that he was willing to admit that he didn't get it. And that he was willing to support us in, he listened and listened carefully, and was willing to support what we felt like we had to do that year for our children. It was really powerful. So even if you don't think they'll get it, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It might work out better than you think.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that I live away from my son, 6 hours away actually.
Mm-hmm.
But what we've done is arranged for the staff at his home to take him to church Wednesday afternoons to meet with his priest and have a one-on-one opportunity. And that's just been a beautiful accommodation that his parish priest has made for my son Mark, and Mark loves and cherishes that half hour every Wednesday with Father John.
That's wonderful.
That is beautiful. And so we're talking a little bit about the services and maybe the people who have certain disabilities can't attend to services as much, but what about those in the family that want to be there and can't? So what are some alternatives for family members to be fed during Lent when someone in the family it would push them over the edge to be in a lot of services?
Something that's helped my family is my husband and I taking turns going to services. And my guy is now 14, and we've never really made him go to extra services that often. It's just sometimes too much for him during the week, except when I had him in the carrier and I could just bring him in and stick him in a pew and let him sit there while I was praying myself. Then he was in church a lot. But that's a big thing, to just be able to switch on and off with your spouse and allowing them time to pray, and you can stay at home. And, one of the blessings, some people don't see it a blessing, of our past year and a half is that so many services are now streamed.
Yes.
But for families like us, this is a huge blessing. And even if you are attending to your family, there's no reason why that service still can't be on and everyone hears it. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to be planted in front of the screen. I also know, and because I've lived through this, we often don't like to ask for help. You don't want to impose on people with your life and what we all have to deal with. But in many ways, I have come to see it as such a huge blessing when I have allowed people into our life and into our family rhythm. So I would suggest, don't be afraid to ask family members, close friends, even people in the parish, if they would be willing to come and spend time with your child if you're unable to take them to the service, and allow you to go to the services. My brother did this for my husband and I recently, and we laughed because we went out. We were on our way to see the Canon of St. Andrew of Crete, and we were closing the front door. I looked at my husband like, I feel like we're going on a date, but we're going to church, because it had been such a long time. We normally would just leave my son home with my mom, who's getting older, and it's getting harder for her in the evenings. So it was kind of a weird feeling, but a good feeling. We've also had so many parishioners, especially teenagers, who have come through our life, who have said, we will hang out with Theo during the service. If he needs to go downstairs, if he just wants to sit with us, if he wants to walk around, we'll do that. And I mean, as one would move out of our life, the Holy Spirit would bring another young person in our parish into our life to help us with that. And it's been nothing but a blessing, allowing those people into kind of our crazy chaos here. So those would be two of my personal suggestions.
For us, we did a lot of taking turns when the kids were younger, and then we went through a long period where we took 2 cars. Both of us drove. We took all of the kids when we could, and the rule was, when the first person who was ready to leave, that was when the first car left, and everybody had the option to go then. And we called it, because we didn't use this just for church. It was something that we had adapted for all kinds of family related stuff, going to visit the grandparents or anywhere. 2 cars. With 5 kids between us, 2 cars actually made things easier in a lot of ways. You could spread the kids out. There's not as much poking and fighting in the car. But the main thing was, when somebody decided that they had had enough, they came to the closest parent. Well, the parent that was leaving with the first car, because everybody knew which parent was leaving first. And they would go to the parent who was leaving first and say, I'm ready to go. And we left. There was no cajoling, no, oh, can't you stay another 15 minutes? No, nothing. When they said they were ready to go, it's like, first car is leaving. Who else wants to go in the first car? Anybody who wanted to go in the first car left. The second car left when the second parent wanted to leave. So the kids understood that if they didn't leave with the first car, they were staying till the end. And it gave them the opportunity to assess their own needs and to become, rather than relying on outside cues, other people telling them what they had to do and when they'd had enough, they were learning how to assess that for themselves. And it was really wonderful. It wasn't always fun. If you were the first car to leave on Pascha, it might mean that you don't even get through the Paschal canon. Oh, well. But that meant that there was no meltdown. So you might not get through the Paschal canon anyway. And one of the things we realized is that when we started allowing our kids when they were developmentally able, and we allowed them to say, I'm done, I need to go, they could actually last longer and participate more because they weren't afraid. They weren't worried about, well, what happens, when I get to where I just can't do it anymore. They knew exactly when they got to where they couldn't do anymore, we were out the door. So yeah, taking turns, 2 cars, give the kids some say in how long they feel like they can last. Those are all really useful tools. And if you can get outside support, that's,
Yes.
depending on your kids' needs. When you have multiple kids with special needs, disabilities, getting that outside support can be hard. Because people can feel overwhelmed and you're going, well, this is my normal, but yeah, it's overwhelming for you. But if you can get it, yeah, it's huge. And I understand church as date night. I mean, we sometimes feel like going to the grocery store is date night.
Yes. There's a certain freedom. But some of us, I also would like to add, there are some of us who have children who are medically challenged, and it might mean that we are home with our child because their needs are such that we are the ones that must provide for them, that a friend or a teenager would not be able to handle the type of needs they have. And in that case, I've been through that. And at first it is hard because you don't want to miss out. You want to be there. If you're serious about your faith, you want to pray, you want to receive the strength that comes from being in the services, and to receive Holy Communion when possible, with the increased offering of pre-sanctified gifts, all of those things. But there comes a time when you realize that there's a piece about the sacrifice you're making, because your liturgy is your child now. So your offering to God is what you are doing to help your child. And that needs to be remembered. That is the whole purpose of Lent, is that we become closer to Christ, more like him, and we're walking in that sacrifice with him. And if we see it that way as an opportunity to walk in his suffering, and I'm not saying that it becomes a joyful sacrifice. It's not like a drudgery, or it becomes a peace that this is this beautiful gift that I've been given this child, and I am happy to offer my gift back to him for God's glory. Now, that doesn't always happen when you're tired and overwhelmed and you need God. I'm not trying to put rose-colored glasses on when I say this, but there is a peace when you start to see it in that way, that this is an offering I'm making to God. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
And that's where, if I can, Melanie, we're having the flexibility with Zoom and streaming services and things like that, because even if your parish doesn't have those services, you can find another parish that does and watch the stream. And many of them have them recorded. So you can go back when you have your 5 minutes of respite, whenever that might be in the day, and soak in some of the prayers of the church too. But I 100% agree that our prayer is the care of those who God has put us in our lives to care for, whether it's our family members that have special needs, whether it's, and all of us have special needs, whether it's me helping to care for my mom or me helping to care for my son. And that becomes my prayer. And it's probably more to my salvation than perhaps maybe even me just going and hearing the prayers of the church.
I think one of you said a little bit ago, I'm trying to parse it back together, but if you're streaming the services, one of the things that I'll say is, like, I even now when I don't have little kids and stuff at home, I find it very difficult to stay focused on a service that's being live streamed. I don't focus well. It's a struggle for me at work too, because so many of our meetings are just like this one right now. And it's a hard way for me to really stay focused. But for the church, I put the service on, whether I'm going to be able to focus on it or not. And I feel like I'm standing in a river, and it's just washing over me. And I'm becoming part of it, and it's becoming part of me. And that isn't to say I wouldn't benefit more if I could focus better on it. But if I realize that what I have to do right now is unload the dishwasher, which I wouldn't even think about if I were at church. But here we are. It's 2 years into the pandemic, and sometimes what I can do is just have it on. And interestingly, I can do that even though I'm working full time, because I can put my personal computer on and have the service on at a low volume while I'm still attending to my office job. And that's kind of a blessing that was not available in any way at all. So having the music, the hymns, the voice of my priest, the voice of my presbytera, the choir that I can experience all of that. And so if I put it on in the background while I'm working, I know I'm not going to be attending to it at all. And I don't know, maybe it's mind games with myself, but I really do feel like I get something out of that spiritually it helps create Lent, what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Right. We what we receive, what we hear with our senses, what we feel, it's an atmosphere of prayer, playing chant music for our children while we're going about the day. It creates a prayerful atmosphere. So what we watch, what we hear, all of those things are what we feed ourselves on. So absolutely, it may not be as good as being there in person, but it's definitely helpful. It helps to put us in that zone of prayer. So let's talk a little bit about.
Go ahead. And I promise I'll be super quick about it. Something came to mind as you were all talking. And this is, I think, in general in our lives, but maybe it's something we could start during Great Lent. And having those discussions with our spiritual father, if there is a way, if you are not able to make it not only to pre-sanctified, but to liturgy on Sundays, if they are willing to bring the gifts to you. And I think that's something we forget that we are able to ask for. We normally think that's maybe for our older family members in the parish, those who we consider shut-ins or elderly, but it is for anyone to ask who is unable to come. So, maybe take the opportunity to talk to your spiritual father about bringing the gifts to your home and arranging that time so it's for you, but also for your children who are not able to attend, if they are able to take the gifts. I know for sensory reasons, some of our kids have difficulty with that, but just a thought I had as I heard you all speaking.
Thank you. That's very important to remind us. Thank you. So let's talk about the actual fasting from food, because I know this is a big hang up for many of us moms. And when we're preparing food for the family, and maybe we want to fast, but some other family members are just not able to, sensory wise, texture wise, certain foods are just unappealing. We need to make sure they're nourished properly. And also, I grew up in a very pious, I came from a background of piety with fasting, where fasting was almost a moral standard, where it was right up there with one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt fast. And so it's really in there with me. But I want to talk about that it is really an exercise, and we're not all Olympic athletes. And we have to start where we can start and do what we can do. So maybe you all can give suggestions about how you've handled the fasting piece of things with your families, and I can pitch in as well.
Well, I'll mention that for me with my son, Mark, his diet was just so limited that we really couldn't incorporate the fast. But what was an interesting point was then how we handled it with our other children. And then they would always say, well, Mark doesn't. And then it would be an education process of understanding that we make adaptations for all of us in our lives and things of that nature. So we never were able to kind of incorporate it in our lives. Oh, well, although there was a subtle thing that Mark didn't even realize, but one of the few things he does enjoy is ice cream, and he just didn't have that during Lent. And when he'd ask, we say, no, not now. And but he wasn't able to process the why part of it. But still, what we could do, we did with him in that regard.
And so my kids, because when they were young, we mostly just fixed fasting meals and they ate what the family ate. And for myself, it was important to me. I'm a convert. I already had 2 of my kids when I joined the church, and the idea of my kids going so long without dairy seemed like, oh my God, how are their bones going to grow and stuff. So I was perfectly fine, and our priest blessed. If we had vegetarian chili, we dump cheese on top of the kids' portions and that kind of stuff. So I could still fix one meal for the family and still feel like my kids were getting appropriate nutrition and all of that. My younger 2 kids are both autistic, and when they were young, they're adults now, they manage their own meals, and I don't have any say in it, and that's wonderful. That's the way it should be. But when they were young, like many autistic kids, they had very, very restricted diets. And taking things out was just not feasible. The An adult might be able to survive the whole of Lent and Holy Week eating nothing but plain noodles and white bread, but the kids aren't going to be able to manage school and activities and stuff. So we didn't limit their diet. It took a while to come to that, but then my youngest has chronic migraine, and certain foods that she did eat turned out to be migraine triggers, which limited her diet even more. So and then my husband is on a medically restrictive diet. So what he will do for his Lenten diet is that his Lenten diet becomes following his medical diet exactly, because a lot of us on medical diets we cheat, you know. You have a little something that you're not supposed to have. So it's like during Lent, you don't cheat on your, if you have to eat foods that aren't strictly Lenten to manage a health condition and you're following your doctor's instructions. You know, I had to learn to do that when I was pregnant with, it was newly Orthodox and pregnant, and trying to keep the fast. And you know, my priest had to tell me, no, you don't. And Presbyter Melanie explained that to me recently, that the point of fasting is to humble your body. And if your body is already humbled, whether it's from a medical condition that you've developed in middle age, like my husband, or whether you're autistic or have migraine or some other health condition where food doesn't react in your body and mind the way it does for other people, or you're pregnant or whatever it is, if your body is humbled, you don't need to drive it down anymore. You might need to treat it with some tenderness, and that might not include vanilla ice cream, but it might include a grilled cheese sandwich, or it might include chicken nuggets if you've got a child that's the only protein they eat, because their body is already dealing with things that the rest of us don't deal with.
Thank you, Charlie. Natalie, you had brought up some.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, you're not alone. Working as a national youth director, I have parents talk to me all the time about how hard fasting is within families. And I just want you to know, like, you're not alone. None of us are alone with this. Every family is struggling with it. And so I think taking all the suggestions you hear today, again, you know, I think they're always take on so much guilt with what we can and can't do. And we have to be able, maybe that's something we can work on during Great Lent, is to step away from that and leave it at our Lord's feet. And knowing that he knows what we can and can't handle with fasting. My son is, like I said earlier, he's 14 and he just didn't get fasting. I mean, you know, we could give him fasting foods, but he didn't understand why, you know, that they were without meat, without dairy. So in many ways, you know, fasting is a spiritual discipline of understanding of what we're doing. So if they don't have that ability to understand why they're doing it, in many ways, I mean, to me, Father Anthony, you can tell me if I'm wrong, and he will. I guess it's fasting, but yes and no, because they don't get it. So, you know, now that Theo's older and he's now starting to understand, now we will say to him, you know, Theo, today is Friday. It's a special day. We're going to do something called fasting. And he looks at me and I know the wheels are turning. I'm not quite sure how they're turning, but they're turning. And he'll accept it and he'll eat whatever we have. But, you know, we're slowly introducing it to him now at 14. The greater expanse of Great Lent is still, I think, too much for him. So I also look at it this way. I have a mother who's 85. She also needs certain nourishments, and there's her diet is changed very much so at this age. So I have people all at different places in my house. And so a lot of times I cook for them and I'm the one who takes away. And I take on the fasting on behalf of my son, on behalf of my mother, sometimes on behalf of my husband. So, I think sometimes there are ways to do that as well. And I know it's tough because we already take on a lot as the parents. But sometimes I think of that myself, like I will fast because they cannot. So those are just a
I
couple
love
things I do in my family.
I love that. I think it's a beautiful offering if you're there. If you're in that space where you feel that's a sacrifice you willingly want to make, it will be blessed. So the more we willingly, not out of guilt, but out of love, offer that, I think it's a beautiful offering to do on behalf of someone else. I like that idea.
Yeah, and it's you're not wrong, Natalie, by any means. You never are. But it really is the thing that we have to think about. First of all this is just guidelines, for spiritual growth, and each person has to be considered separately and uniquely. I think as we approach those things, and if there's not an understanding, then what's the purpose of it? And so I think that's the way to approach it. And each of us knows our own children best. And so therefore we have to work closely with our parish priests, our spiritual fathers, in how we best manage the spiritual growth of our children. And there has to be that partnership, so I'm more than happy as a parish priest to talk to a parent about what's best for their child, first letting the parents know that they're the expert in their child, not me. And then we can work together to come up with something that might be beneficial. And then if we have to adapt, we might have to adapt even from that.
I'm reminded of a story, St. John Maximovich. I can't remember which book it was written about him, but a young teenage boy wanted to fast very strictly during Lent, and his parents weren't on the same page. They were worried about his growth, his nutrition, and he went to St. John, and they came to St. John about this. And now this man was a faster. He ate once a day, all the time, not even during Lent, right? He did not eat hardly at all. But he gave the advice he brought the whole family in, gave the advice to the teenager and said, look, your obedience and honoring your father and mother is much more important than your fast. And so I have always taken that away, is like, keep things in perspective. Even a saint like St. John, who is such a great faster, made that clear. We have a question here. It says, I'm an adult with physical disabilities that make me look really different during the services. I can't always stand for the whole gospel, for instance, let alone the 12 Gospels of Holy Thursday. I also sit in ways that have gotten me scolded by older folks. How can we help others to understand what we do for accommodations? That's a really important question to talk about.
Yeah, I would suggest, first of all, going to talk to your parish priest about it, so that the parish priest, as an educational measure, can share with the whole parish that we are all unique, and it's not our place to judge what anybody does to us, to the left or the right. Matter of fact, we ought to be like racehorses, that they put these blinkers on, so all we do is focus on God straight ahead at the altar, and not focus on what our brothers and sisters are doing to the right and left of us. And that happens in so many aspects of parish life. Young children that might be crying, or somebody who's habitually coming late. Well, that's not the concerns of every parishioner. We need to focus on ourselves. And so maybe the parish priest can help address that in a broader sense to educate the entire parish. And if it needs to be in a more specific situation, maybe the priest can go and talk to those individuals who might make it difficult for others, because it's not our place to judge our brother or sister, just to pray for them.
Yeah. I just have to agree with Father Anthony. I think your spiritual father, your priest, has to be your first line of defense with this. As we know, a lot of our life is education, whether it's something we've asked to take on or it's not, but it is a part of our life for those of us families who have kids with unique needs. And so I think that education within the parish is really important. And beyond Great Lent, maybe these are just discussions we need to start having with our parish councils, with our youth leaders, with our parish priest to say, how can we better educate our parish so that we are all fully, members of the body at all times. So I just completely agree with Father Anthony. I couldn't give more than that, but I can never give more than his answers. So, or Charlotte. I just met Charlotte, but she's the same way. I can't give
thank you.
one of them.
Yeah. So
what about me? I want to feel the love.
Well, I was going to give you a little love.
I'm going to be you when I grow up someday, PR Mel.
No, but I'm going to give you a little bit of love here, because one of the things that I think is underutilized in our parishes, yes, you can go to your priest, and you probably should. You can also go talk to your presbytera. Your presbytera can be a ferocious line of defense for you. You can also go to the old women. I'm actually a fair bit older. I got good genes. I'm a bit older than I look. I got really good genes. But the older women, the women whose children are grown, who have been there and done that, if you are an adult with a disability and someone is hassling you, talk to me. I will go stand between you and them. I will be there for you. I think your presbytera will be there for you. Actually, the scriptures talk about the older women teaching the younger women. Call on us. Let us do that for you. If somebody is, one of my children has very low core strength. It doesn't matter how much exercising and stuff. Had a blessing from Father to sit for the whole service, just because, and that was part of how we got the child to attend. And somebody told my child, stand up, and my child said, I have a blessing from Father, which should be powerful, and it should be enough. And the person said, don't you lie to me. Father would never give you a blessing for that. And my child left the church in tears. And I needed somebody to stand with me for that. So look for your presbytera. Yes, talk to Father. He can do the parish-wide educational piece. But look for the old women, look for your presbytera, and pull them in, because they have the gift. Either like me, they've been there, done that, or it's just you'll know you're not standing alone.
Look for the friends. Not all older women. Some are brought up in a very in a very pious vein, and they may not understand that. So, but look for the friends who can help support you. And also, I would just like to add, your limitations. God sees that. Everything you can offer him is accepted with love and seen, and just have that in your heart that, yes, we need to educate our parishes. We need to educate other people. But I even tell this to my mother, who has bad hips, and she won't sit down certain times. And I'm like, I know you're in pain. Don't worry about what other people think. Please just sit. I know you're in pain. And so God knows we're in pain. He knows that we can't always physically do everything that is called for us to do. And he wants us there. And I think the most important thing is just the efforts we're making. So let's share some tools as we go forward, tools that have helped our families to, whether it's attending to services when the child is there, or making Lent feel like Lent, even if you can't be at services. What are some tools that you can share with our listeners here?
One thing, if I may, while Mark wasn't able to comprehend why we were doing all kinds of things, there were certain things that happened in Lent that he gravitated towards. For example, the prayer of St. Ephrem. The words didn't mean anything to him, but the idea of prostrations kind of seemed like a cool thing for him to do. And he saw everybody doing it, and he would just regularly do prostrations at the appropriate times. He knew when it was the appropriate time. And the encouragement that so many people in the parish gave him by the knowledge that they saw in him an understanding of something different is happening now, and he was in his own way being obedient to God in doing this. So I think when we see things happen anywhere, how close they might be to what we think they should be, we need to encourage that, and give affirmation that they're doing well. And same thing with our families who are struggling, because they have to tend to their special needs family member, whatever, giving them that encouragement too. I think that's an important thing, because we do stand together as brothers and sisters, just like we're talking about kind of standing in between those who cause, issues. We also have to be the ones to go over and put our arms around and just give that loving affirmation that I see you, I'm praying for you, and what can I do to help you? I think that's an important thing.
I have some practical resources for everyone. Many of us, I'm sure, use either visual schedules or first, then picture cards, and we use them in our homes. They might get used in school, but sometimes we just forget that we could use them in church. So, maybe think about how could I come up with a visual schedule, or I know that I believe, is it Summer Kennard who has one that's pre-made? So
Yes.
Summer Kennard on her website has pre-made social
Social stories.
schedules, visual schedules. My office with the St. Nicholas Ministry, and I can show you that. I don't think we have sharing capabilities this time around. We realize that most of us have our own very unique schedules. So what we have done is we have created over 250 picture tiles for you to make your schedule for your child, or your first then cards. Something else that worked for my son in life is chunking out his schedule or his day or whatever, or his activity. So maybe saying to your child, we will do this for 5 minutes and then we can go for a walk. We will come back to our pew for 10 minutes and then we will help with candles, and chunking out the service for them in more tangible and achievable time goals, instead of them thinking I'm here for an hour to an hour and a half. They're thinking, oh, well, I only have 10 minutes until I can take a break. I have 5 minutes. And if your child uses a timer, I can't use a timer in church. Well, put it on vibrate and they can visually see the timer go off. You can use other things. My office also has created what we call sensory activity charts. So you can use those. It will keep their mind occupied and their hands occupied. Again, speaking to your spiritual father about what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. Sometimes our kids just need to be fidgeting with something. Maybe they need a little activity to keep them going. And just saying, is it okay if they sat there and were putting together something or working on something? So I think a lot of the practical tools that we use in our homes and in schools can be applied to our faith. Just being sometimes a little more creative with it. And I know it gets overwhelming. I was overwhelmed when I had to think about a visual schedule for my son. But then, luckily I'm in a position with my job where I could just say, Your Eminence, can I have a blessing to do this? And he said yes. So, now, I can provide tools for others. So I think there are a lot of tools out there and resources, but take the ones already in your life and try to apply them. Oh, there it is.
There we go. Yeah.
So that's one of the sensory activity charts, and you could use those with stickers. You could laminate them, and they could use markers, and then it could just be wiped clean every time. So different things like that you can use with your kids.
I want to recommend, since she mentioned Summer Kennard's website. Summer is also the author of a wonderful book of Such is the Kingdom, and anybody who has disabled people in their family, it is, or in your parish, it's just an amazing, practical, theologically based, hands-on practical book for welcoming disabled people into a parish. I think it's wonderful. One of my tools with kids, I'm a writer, and when my kids were little, I wanted to have a picture book about Pascha for them, because the little ones don't remember what happened last Easter. I mean, they really don't until they get there. So I wanted them to have picture books to rehearse all throughout Lent, to rehearse Pascha coming. The book didn't exist. The book I wanted just didn't exist. So I finally wrote it. That's why we have Catherine's Pascha. And of course, my daughter was, by the time it was published, my daughter was grown with a child of her own, because that's how it works. But there are, besides Catherine's Pascha, there's another picture book called The Lucky Egg by Anna Pokroff, I think is the author. Anyway, those are two picture books that focus on Pascha. And I can't recommend enough, if you have children for whom picture books are developmentally appropriate, to make those their Lenten books. We do spiritual reading during Lent. I think most adults who enjoy reading at any rate will pick spiritual books to read during Lent. And Catherine's Pascha, The Lucky Egg, and Lent by the Duck Pond by Mother Melania. Those are three, like I said, I can't recommend enough to have those available for your children to read all through Lent. When you do that, when they get to Pascha, they know where they're going and they know what to expect when they get there. Our kids, all young children, but then children with developmental disabilities as well, need to rehearse things more. And picture books are a way to do that.
I thought I would share something from my family. It's why I blacked out for a second. So we started doing this actually 3 or 4 years ago during Great Lent to help. Charlie said perfectly, like practicing to get those memory skills going. And he's a very visual kid. He's still working on his reading. So we started doing a Great Lenten like book where we would take each Sunday of Great Lent and allow him to create a different page. And like I said, we've been doing this for 3 years now, and each time we do it, we talk about the day, what it means, what it's going to mean for the week. And we found that he's really come to enjoy doing this and looks forward to putting a new page. And so we've actually expanded it beyond Great Lent and Pascha, and now we do it throughout the entire year. So this is just something that our family does to give him sort of that visual and tactile to understand what's going on during the fast into the feast. So
now those are all amazing suggestions. I put the link for the UOC Orthodox St. Nicholas Ministry in the chat. I tried to also put a link to one of Charlotte's articles, Lent for Special Needs. It's a wonderful article that summarizes a lot of things we can do to feel like it's Lent, even if we can't participate in the ways we might want to. But I also, and then all of the things that we've shared, for those who have family members who are maybe more even cognitively compromised, like my son, sometimes it just becomes a natural learning process where they get used to it. Sometimes we model, like for instance, receiving Holy Unction. Michael's medically fragile. He's been poked a lot like a pincushion. He's very defensive of anyone touching him with anything. So it was very distressing for me when he would fight my husband trying to put Holy Unction on him as we're going through the line. It was very painful. So I've come a long way. I've just gotten used to the fact that he's defending himself. He doesn't know what's happening. So I've just become the model for him. Okay, Michael, first mommy, and then my husband will anoint me, and now Michael's turn. And just that modeling kind of has put him at peace. And then he's gotten used to the fact that that's not going to hurt him. Nothing is going to poke him. So just little things we can do for those who might not attend to picture schedules as well, or just don't want to give you the time of day when you're trying to do those things, because I've found that to be the case with my son. Also, there's a very important question that came in. It's a serious one, and I know our time is important, but I think this is more important, so I want to talk about this question. Someone asked, what do you do if your parish priest has a stigma against mental illness and you have a family member with it?
Yes, if I can jump in, I saw the question, Sophia. So I think that you have several different options, but if you need assistance, I would suggest you find out who the dean is of your deanery, who might then be able to address it with a fellow priest. If you need to, you go to the bishop, or I will even offer myself, because coming from priest to priest, it can be a little easier to kind of help understand those things. And I'll put my email address in the chat here. If I can help in any way, I'd be happy to reach out and talk to one of my brother priests if it'll be helpful, to kind of bring some recognition to each other, because not all of us have been evenly equipped. And I'm not saying anything about your priest. I have my shortcomings in my pastoral ministry too. And I would hope a brother priest would come to me and help me grow in my priesthood as well. And so that's how I would suggest you go about it. Either your dean, if necessary, the bishop, or if there's another priest that you know of, who maybe a local priest in the community who has a good relationship with yours, that could talk to him about it. In the meantime, I'll put my email address here too, if I can be of help.
That's a great suggestion. So the dean, we would call it the chancellor in the Greek tradition, so it might sound a little different. You could reach out to your chancellor, and that's a good point. Priests are human beings. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and they do as well. So not everyone's going to be just as understanding as another. So in closing, how can we, as families that are acquainted with disabilities, acquire a spirit of peace despite any of the change that we have to make, the adjustments we have to make in this Lenten season?
The thing that helped me in for a brief period in my life, I was a single mom, with kids with with disabilities, and it was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And a nun that I knew and my priest both talked to me about this idea that the church is a community, the church is a body, the church, we're all in it together. And if you can't, somebody else can. So you can take on fasting for your mother or your child. Somebody can take on praying for you. If you're at a point where the best you can do to pray is to walk over in front of your icons and bow once, and that's it, that is all you have left in you, know that somebody else is praying. And there will come another day when you're the one. So trust each other.
It's beautiful.
And I would just add, be thankful,
Yes.
for every blessing in your life, whether it's that 2 minutes of quiet you had earlier in the day, or even if it's in the chaos of the day, that you have the opportunity to have a child to love, that God's going to give you the patience to get through it, whatever it might be, and just be thankful, and see everything as a blessing, even the challenges, because they will help you move closer to Christ as you take on every opportunity faithfully.
And it can change.
Yes.
One season of life may be very difficult. And I never thought my child would ever get through Holy Week. And last year he made it almost all the way through Holy Week. We had to take Good Friday off because it was too much. And then we went back on Pascha, and he was fine. And so it can change. There will be hills and valleys. It can change up and it can go back down. As Natalie pointed out, sometimes that happens. But it is a season, and it's a season we can learn from. There's always something God is going to teach us. It might be patience. It might be another lesson. But there's always something to be grateful for and to learn from the situations we face. Thank you all for being with us. I hope it's been helpful.
Thank you for arranging this.